Are you the friend who's always being asked for health advice? Now imagine turning that passion into a fulfilling career with our Become a Nutrition Coach program. Step into a world where your enthusiasm for wellness becomes the heart of your own thriving business. With me as your professor and guide and coach on our user-friendly digital platform, you can learn from anywhere at your very own pace. It's perfect for your busy life. Envision empowering others to live their healthiest lives, all while growing a career you love. You're not just gaining a certification here, you're joining a community of like-minded professionals ready to support and celebrate with you every step of the way. So what are you waiting for? It's time to nourish your future and help change lives, including your own. Head over to nutritiouslife.com/BNC for a free class and a sneak peek of the program. Your journey to becoming a nutrition coach begins now. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a solopreneur, or just a human, chances are you've experienced financial stress. Today is for you because financial stress and your overall health are very connected. Welcome to the Living a Nutritious Life podcast. I'm your host, Keri Glassman, and in today's episode, I had the privilege of speaking with Farnoosh Torabi. Farnoosh is one of America's leading personal finance experts. She's the host of the award-winning podcast, So Money, that has earned over 30 million downloads, by the way. Her latest book, A Healthy State of Panic, is part memoir and part guidebook on how fear can be a superpower to achieve true wealth and career success. In today's episode, Farnoosh candidly shares her experience with a financial failure. We also talk about the importance of financial literacy for children. She gives tips for entrepreneurs. I know we have a lot of you listening. And we also discuss the impact of financial stress on overall health. So let's do this and find some financial well-being. And remember, if you love this episode, please rate, review, and share with your friends. Welcome to Living a Nutritious Life. I'm Keri Glassman, a celebrity registered dietitian nutritionist. Join me every Tuesday on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms as I bring in some heavy hitters to share the latest in nutrition and wellness science. We dive deep into food, sleep, stress, relationships, and so much more. Your weekly guide to a happier, healthier, more nutritious life. Welcome, Farnoosh. I am so excited to be chatting with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Keri. I'm so glad to be reconnected. We've known each other forever. And well, life happens, a pandemic happens, and then you meet each other at a book event and you're like, oh my God, where have you been?
Exactly. I know. I was thinking about that before this interview. I was thinking, when did we first meet? When did we first connect? Probably a decade ago, right?
At least.
Yeah, it could have been even longer.
I feel like we would run into each other in green rooms all across the city. Like we both, doing a lot of television. And I might have even interviewed you for Yahoo Finance once upon a time. I don't know. I did a lot of videos for Yahoo Finance. For those who've been following me, the OGs, I had a show on Yahoo Finance called Financially Fit. And occasionally we would go outside of the world of finance and talk to nutritionists and stylists and professors. And it was a really fun show. So maybe that.
Right. People like me who know nothing about finance, but became an entrepreneur.
Exactly. But really, Keri, you're going to come on my podcast and I can't wait to talk to you about your work because I do think it impacts, health is wealth. Your routines,
Absolutely.
your habits that help you to condition your mind and your body, it all works out into your, how you think about money, how you think about work, all of that stuff. It's important.
Absolutely. There is definitely a big intersection between financial wellness and how your financial wellness affects your actual wellness and overall health. Before we even dive into that, though, you just briefly mentioned Yahoo Finance. You mentioned your podcast, So Money. Everyone, by the way, you've definitely got to go check that out. So Money is an incredible podcast. I'm always learning something there. So definitely everybody go check out Farnoosh's podcast. But let's just talk a little bit more about your story. Like, how did you become this financial expert? Like, where did it come from? Were you always interested in finance? And I just think you have also such great practical tips for people as it relates to finance. And I'm all about giving practical tips, all about giving, the deets, the science, all of that, but then making things actionable for people. And I think you do that in the world of finance really, really well. So tell us
Thank
a little
you.
bit the story. Where did this all
Yeah.
come from?
Oh, you mean, it was my dream come true to become a financial expert as a young girl growing up in Massachusetts. But
Wait, you're
truthfully,
from Massachusetts? Did I know that?
well,
I don't know if I knew
yeah, I
that.
don't know. I mean, I grew up. I was born in Worcester. I grew up until I was about like sophomore year of high school. We were in Massachusetts. We moved to Philly. If you read my book, my recent book, Healthy State of Panic, it's part memoir. You'll learn all about my travels
Wait,
throughout
well, I
childhood.
didn't know the Massachusetts thing. So, wow. I'm
Yeah.
so excited that I didn't
Are
know
you
that.
wait? So where from
I'm a
Massachusetts?
Boston girl. I'm a
Oh my
Boston girl.
God, we don't
Yes.
have accents though. Everyone is suspicious
Well, that's why it was
of
hidden from both of us.
Yeah. Well,
Who
I was
knew?
the daughter of immigrants, so I had that influence, my parents' broken English, going to Worcester, and then
I
like
was going to say, you don't say Worcester. So,
Worcester, we I don't say Worcester, but there are certain words that are very New England that I've
like
continued to
wicked
use.
awesome.
Like wicked awesome, but like in school, in your class when you were a young girl and you had to go to the bathroom, what did you ask? We would have to say, "May I go to the laboratory?" Or bubbler was the word for water
Hmm.
fountain. Yeah, all sorts of quirky things. And so that gives it away sometimes when I
That's
something
funny.
sprinkle that in.
I don't know if I'm with you on the lav thing, although
I don't say lab anymore. I feel
there's
like
something that sounds slightly vaguely familiar. Maybe I've blocked it out.
laboratory.
But wicked
Probably.
awesome. I was a wicked awesome
Wicked
girl for sure.
awesome.
I definitely threw out wicked probably until maybe the 5 years ago.
Yeah. Well, I was driving today and the radio announced that the New Kids on the Block are touring again. And they're from Massachusetts. And
Oh, I know they're from Massachusetts.
oh yeah, I just started following Joey McIntyre on Instagram. Highly recommend everybody.
By the way,
Um,
and I've met Joey McIntyre.
what?
Yes, yes, it was a big highlight in my life, but that's
I
a whole other
Oh my
podcast.
gosh. Can we please do that podcast though? Like reliving all of our NKOTB fantasies.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. Okay, sorry, let's go
answer
back to
your
your
question.
story.
So so that's not why I became a financial expert, but I will say that growing up in our household, money was not taboo. I'm the daughter of Iranian immigrants and money
Mhm.
was, you know, sprinkled into casual conversation, how much people made, what the houses in our neighborhood cost,
Hmm.
my dad's stress at work related to layoffs. So that was table conversation for
Hmm.
us. But, and it wasn't all good. My parents argued about money. I learned a lot about money. I had a very sort of fast track sort of like literacy, not everything, but just at least I think the good news is that I grew up in a household that talked about money, the good and the bad. Good news, we talked about money. Bad news, it wasn't always positive. There were arguments, but it allowed me to have an awareness and a fluency around money. Now, that wasn't like the light bulb moment for me to be like, I want to help everybody with their money. But I was always that kid who wanted to be in service of helping people. I
Hmm.
loved storytelling. I loved theater. I loved being an academic. And so as I got older and I had to kind of figure out my career, I was very interested in journalism.
Hmm.
So I went to graduate school for journalism and I did study finance at Penn State. So coupling that with the graduate degree in journalism, it kind of positioned me well to be a financial journalist. And that's where I spent most of my 20s and early 30s doing is working for different outlets, media outlets. I always wanted to get a variety of experience in terms of the different media platforms. So I started a magazine at Money Magazine. Then I went to New York One News, which is the local New York station, was a
By the way,
producer.
that's where I saw
Is
you a
that
lot.
where?
That's where I think I
Really?
first met you. Yes.
What
Okay,
was,
I don't want to sidetrack again here. Let's stay because I'm loving your story,
oh
but
my
that's
God.
where I think I first met you.
I'm sure because as a New York journalist or media person, like you're going to go there at some point. I probably
Right,
interviewed you.
right.
And then I went to a .com, which was very different and new at the time. It was, I think, the year 2006. And my news director at New York One was like, "You're going to go where? To a website
Right.
and report online, and good luck with that." But it was game changing, right? I got to go to this financial news website, report from the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, report from the NASDAQ, interview CEOs, and build my reel and really get that experience I needed to anchor and all the things. I had stints at CBS later as an anchor, but ultimately, what got me to where I am today as someone who works for herself and I have books and I have a podcast is I got laid off in 2009, actually at thestreet.com where I was corresponding. But the good news about that layoff was that I had just published a book, my first book, the year prior.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my saving grace. It was my parachute, to be able
Mm-hmm.
to, okay, so bad news. I don't have a 401k or a real title anymore. I don't have a salary, but I have a platform. I have
Absolutely.
expertise, and I was
Yep.
able to leverage that even in a recession. So being your own boss is sometimes recession proof.
Yeah, and I love that you gave that example that how well, one, that you leverage this book, this thing that that you'd written, so you've created this book based off of the expertise and the years of experience that you had working, but you also use that, as they say, rejection for redirection.
Yeah.
And sometimes those experiences are the biggest blessings in
Oh,
disguises, right?
yeah.
When one door closes, another one opens, and that's like such a good example. But I like that, again, you had that book. That doesn't mean if somebody doesn't have a book that if they get laid off that they can't, choose another direction. It still can be a time and place to pivot. But having that book and sort of having started doing your own thing on the side gave you sort of that, probably 10 steps forward to go and start maximizing and leveraging that thing to start, your own again, or build on
Yeah.
your own platform. You already had your own platform, but to build off of that, which is great.
Yeah, I was thrown into the deep end, and grateful for it. At the time, not really grateful for it.
Well,
Let's
of
be
course,
honest.
of course.
I was despondent, but thankfully I had people around me who were encouraging me to look at the bright side or the opportunities. Luckily, I had financial runway. I had been saving. I had a little bit of severance so that I could afford myself some a period of time where I didn't have to immediately think things through. I could just let life happen, and
Right.
I
And let
worked
the
out
dust
a
settle.
lot. I
Yeah.
got back
Yeah.
into shape. I mean, I was like, okay, this is my time. I've been
Right.
going 100 miles per hour, and maybe this is like, how can I make the most of this break?
Right. And again, I think that's also a really important point. If you're going through this or if you've been through something like this, it's always good to remember that you're generally not grateful in the moment. You're allowed to be angry, bitter, upset, cranky. You're allowed to be all kinds of things if that happens to you and you get laid off. But again, it's a good lesson to remember that something good usually comes from it, whether it takes you in a completely different direction or again, like you leverage the platform that you had already began building. Like, and it's obviously looking back, hindsight's 2020. It's so much easier to look back and feel that way. But I think like there's lots and lots and lots of examples like that, right? Like there's so many out there. I think sometimes when we're going through it, we just have to remind ourselves of that. But also, like you said, you you'd saved money. You had been following your own advice. You put yourself in a position where it was okay. You had some breathing room. So that's also a good thing. And, we're going to dive into some of that today because that's your, expertise. But I read somewhere, you said that understanding money and investing was really just a cover for a desire to understand life. Did I get that right?
Understanding money is really you're unpacking life. I find that for me, why I love talking about money is because you really do get to the humanity of someone. When someone tells you what their financial values are, or even what they're struggling with, you get to really know them. I love asking folks on my podcast, what is a financial memory from
Mm,
childhood? From childhood, like your first money memory, or just like when you think about money when you were a kid, what pops into your mind? That often tells a incredible story, even if it's like, I don't remember anything, it's like, well, what's that about? you know,
yeah.
So it's very telling. And so, yeah, I think for me, the prioritizing wealth building, wealth creation, investing, for me, and I think for everybody, the message I try to give everybody is that when you care about this, you're essentially saying, I care about my life, my goals, my autonomy, my
Mm.
agency. This is the thing, everybody. If you don't have money, I know it's not the most important thing, but it's important. It's a very important tool, especially in our country. And so having it means having options. And
Mm-hmm.
so important for women to hear this because I don't know if you've been hanging out in the cesspool of the social media that is TikTok and sometimes Instagram, but these like trad wives and
Mm-hmm.
stay-at-home girlfriends.
Well, you were the first one that introduced that to me
Oh,
on social. Following you on social, I saw you post something on that and I said, I'm going to go down this rabbit hole for a
yeah.
moment
I
here.
mean, it's fascinating because, it's 2024 and we think we have come such a long way as far as like women's rights and feminism, but there is a very powerful movement of particularly young women. I don't know where they're getting this message, but that they feel as though it is like life is all about supporting your spouse and your financial independence doesn't matter. It's all about supporting and being in service of your partner. And these women, ironically, are making money online. A lot of these influencers who are the traditional wives, the trad wives, hashtag trad wife, if you want to go
Right.
down that rabbit hole. It's just like, well, actually, you're making money. So you're preaching and demonstrating a lifestyle where the average person is looking at this and saying, I want to emulate that, but they're not going to probably become an influencer online. Realistically, they're going to go down a path where they're going to become financially vulnerable, financially dependent,
Right.
and maybe at some point abandoned and scrambling. I mean, there's actually been a fallout to this, and I'm thankful for this story online where on TikTok, some of these women are saying, oh my gosh, I'm now on the other side of things because he left me or I left him and I don't have a place to live and I don't have savings and I don't even have credit. I have to go back and live with my parents. Thankfully, I even have that as a resource. A lot of us might
Right.
not have a warm bed to go to.
Yeah, it's wild though, because again, you're the one that introduced me to that. Following you on social, I saw that, and I was really kind of shocked by it. But then again, I think our whole world is somewhat backwards at the moment. That I don't know,
Mm.
maybe that's just you part of it. But it's funny when you mention that you ask people what their financial memory is, because I ask people that. I ask clients that all the time. What is a healthy food memory you have from your
Oh my
childhood? So
God.
it's funny that it's like analogous, right? Because that tells a
Right.
massive
Because,
story. It tells a big story. Like you said, when you asked the question, it tells a lot. And so, yeah, that's interesting.
oh my God.
So your financial wellness, I mentioned this at the beginning of our conversation. Financial wellness plays a big role into your actual wellness and your overall health. And I read somewhere also that people who suffer financial stress are 13 times more likely to
Yeah.
have a heart attack. And I mean,
100%.
that to me is not surprising in the least. I mean, I see it with clients. When I ask about their stress levels, and when they
Yeah.
mention financial stress, you can see it even in their body language as they talk about it. The stress of it and how much it weighs on them. And we know what happens to your body. I mean, we don't need to get into all the physiological things that occur in your body when you're stressed, but especially with many people with financial stress, it's chronic and it's just ongoing. So oftentimes there's no relief from that. So that stat did not surprise me in the least, but I just wanted to see sort of what you see here, what
Hmm.
you what you uh,
Yeah.
what you recommend people to do here.
So two thoughts immediately on that stat, which is sobering, and I've experienced it. I've experienced the stress that
Mm-hmm.
derives from financial uncertainty, and it does keep you up at night, and your hair does fall out, and your skin does itch, and stress manifests in very different ways for people, and I think but it's universal. I mean, at some point, unless maybe you're even Jeff Bezos, I'm pretty sure has like restless nights, but like maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Billionaires have
We're not
different
related to
problems. More money,
finances, at
more
least.
problems, I guess. But like at some point, someone's going to experience stress related to a financial matter or even a work related matter, which sometimes means comes down to the money. So two things. I think one is that we have a very emotional relationship with money, where money often symbolizes status. It symbolizes intelligence. It symbolizes worthiness. Having more means more of those things. Having less means less of those things. It's a myth. People think that someone who's wealthy, they must have worked harder or they were smarter, they were more strategic. But you don't know. Maybe they just grew up with, a silver spoon, or they won the lottery, or they worked at a company that IPO'd overnight. Everyone has
Mm-hmm.
a story, they're not sharing it, but we make a lot of assumptions, and we often will feel very bad about ourselves. We'll feel shame, we'll feel guilt when we have credit card debt, when we're not making as much as we want, when we have a lot of bills piling up. We personalize that as to suggest that this is all our doing and we are dumb and we don't have what it takes and we just can't. Look, I'm all for self accountability, and I think there's an aspect of that in your financial life. But listen, I mean, the world, as you said, is upside down. Inflation, there's unemployment. I know the unemployment rate doesn't really reflect what I'm seeing and maybe what you're seeing amongst your friend group, like especially for people who are mid-career to higher level in their careers, white collar jobs. These are not being handed out like candy right now. If you get laid off right now and you work in tech, or you are maybe a mid-level or a senior executive, it's very difficult to source another job right now quickly, or even within the next few months. Companies are really taking their time to hire. There's hiring freezes. So all this to say that, yes, to some extent, there is what we can do, but then there's a lot that we can't control. But nevertheless, we internalize our financial failures as meaning like, this is all my fault. And that leads to stress. So that's
Mm-hmm.
one thing that I see that I think is important for us to recognize and stop ourselves when we start to get down when we spiral.
Right. And probably also hopelessness, which can lead
Yeah,
to a whole array of mental health issues as well.
right. The thing about the stress piece of it, though, is that we often stress in silence.
I want to take a moment to tell you about our podcast sponsor, which I'm a super fan of. In today's fast-paced go world, it's so easy to get overwhelmed and lose focus, especially when you're trying to accomplish critical tasks that require a sharp mind. If you're looking for a way to support your brain health and stay on top of your game, if you know me at all, you know I'm always looking to do that. Well, then you want to know about cognizant acetylcholine. This nutrient helps support brain function, and it plays a vital role in nourishing and protecting brain cells. Cognizant acetylcholine can help support focus, memory, and attention, promote cognitive performance, and support overall brain health. It's also known for its ability to support brain energy and is backed by numerous studies that show its effectiveness. Whether you're a student, a busy professional, a multitasking parent, or anyone looking to optimize mental clarity and sharpness, adding cognizant acetylcholine to your daily routine can help you achieve those goals and support your brain for the future. It can be found in many different products, including chewables, gummies, beverages, and even cold brew coffee. Visit cognizant.com for exactly where to find this ingredient, and don't forget to look for Cognizant on the label.
We often stress in silence. We have financial troubles that we're ashamed to admit out loud to others. And that only perpetuates the stress, and it snowballs,
Mm-hmm.
and you get to a point where maybe you are having a heart attack. So it's really important to come clean and to talk to someone about it, whether that is your therapist, your financial advisor, your friend, someone you trust, and to know that you are not alone. Everyone is experiencing some level of stress with their financial lives, potentially, maybe not now, but in the road, or they have. And, for me, this was like about 2018, I was taking on a new entrepreneurial venture with two other founders, women founders. It was really exciting. It was called Stack's House. It was a financial museum, a physical structure in LA that we were constructing. Think of like Museum of Ice Cream or Museum of
Mm-hmm.
Pizza, but for women and money. So it was
Mm-hmm.
this beautiful, Instagrammable, 11,000 square foot warehouse that we turned into a museum that celebrated women and money, financial feminism, all those things. It was really beautiful. But behind the scenes, the financial turmoil, let me tell you, it needed a documentary of its own. It was like so many things were falling apart. And it wasn't because we hadn't done our due diligence. We had lawyers, we had bank accounts, we had investors, we were planned up to the wazoo. Like we were on top of things. We were all very good at our roles, but we couldn't, for example, our production company that we initially hired just kept dead ending us, and we had to fire them and find a new production company. We lost hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, yeah, it was a nightmare. And so, long story short, I got really stressed about how we were $1 million in debt
Wow. Wow.
between the three of us with
Like
this one.
that's those nights where you wake up in the middle of the night with your
Oh, you're
heart
not
pumping. Yeah.
sleeping.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was not sleeping. And I mean, fortunately, I
Well, how'd
had
you get yourself out of that?
savings. I had to work. I was just like, I'm going to work. I'm going to do more projects. I'm going to like create more out of my butt and try to
Yeah.
sell things. And, like as an entrepreneur, you're like, time to sell, time to create new things. And I did. And now we are out of debt, the three of us. But in that moment, what
And
saves
what
me,
happened to that project?
it ended up we opened doors, people came, you can Google it. It was this beautiful, we did the thing, but not without a lot of financial failure. And luckily, we were forced to never do it again because of the pandemic. A
Mm,
couple of my partners wanted to continue pursuing it. And I was like, ladies, this is like not financially. I mean, if we're going to do this, we need to have all the money secured up front.
mhm.
There's no more money. Like we don't have any more savings. So the circumstances of the pandemic made it so we just had to shelf it. But over those 2 years, it just sort of dissipated. And I had a new stress in my life called COVID-19 and raising two kids and running my business during that. But it was an ending that was needed. And I'm so glad that it did. It was almost like, when you get laid off, sometimes the best things in life are not in your control. It's like the decisions that are made for you that you have to rise
Yes.
to the
Yes.
occasion. You have to rise to the occasion. It's not the rejection, it's how you deal with it. Um,
Absolutely.
and I just wrote a piece in my newsletter about what I would tell my 19-year-old self about
Mhm.
rejection and work and money. And I would say to her that rejection is a part of life. The key is to get really good at it.
Right. So
You
good.
gotta get
So
good
good.
at it.
Right? I mean, being resilient and being able to handle those things that you just said are decided for you. Because there are a lot of things, as much as you try to be, you can be intentional and you can be in control of a lot of things and you can do a lot of things right. But there are a lot of decisions that are going to be made for you. And
Yeah.
it's, again, exactly what you said. It's how do you handle those situations?
And because I find that we try to fix problems that are not fixable. They're not meant to be fixed. Can we just accept that? It's
Mhm.
like, or I'm not the person to fix it. It's not my responsibility, or I'm done. I'm just done. You and I met at the event um, for Practical Optimism, the book
Yes.
by
Yeah.
Dr.
Dr. Sue Varma. I love
Dr. Sue
her.
Varma. And
Yeah.
I learned that night as I moderated the conversation with her, and you were in the audience. I think my biggest aha moment in speaking with her was, I think, something that her father told her, just about how there's two ways you can go through life, or two ways you can approach a problem. You can try to fix it till it like stresses you out to like, and you're depleted, or at some point you realize like, this is a problem and it's just going to continue to be a problem, so I'm going to walk away from it. And we don't give ourselves that permission. We feel, especially as women and especially as entrepreneurs, we feel like we have to,
Mm.
everything, there are books. It's like, everything's figure outable. Well, yeah,
Right.
but what is it going to cost you? There's a
It's
cost.
such a good point. It's
Can you
such a good
afford
point.
it?
It's such a good point
Is
because
it worth
can
it?
you afford it financially and can you afford it mentally?
Exactly.
Right? Like what else is going to suffer in your life? There are some doors that are meant to be closed. There are some books that are meant to
And guess
end. There are
what?
chapters that are meant to be over, and
And
that's
and
okay.
and that's the solution. The solution is to like say, okay, I'm putting this to rest. Like I am not going to lose another night of sleep over this. And you know, this is very relative, and I don't mean to say that all things that are stressing you out, just like ignore it. Some things do need to be addressed.
Of course.
Um, but and like there's a privilege to being able to be like, okay, no more. Sometimes you don't have a choice. We have to go back to the job that we hate. We have to go back, until we find another way out. But I think we just don't even think we don't give ourselves that permission to go, oh, I can't, that is, and my father, when I was super stressed in my early 20s, I had this job actually at New York One. And I write about it in A Healthy State of Panic about how I don't know if it was like a mid quarter life crisis or what was going on, but I was having panic attacks and it was stress related at work. I mean, I had a very stressful job. I think I was underqualified for that job in the beginning. Truth be told, they like took a huge leap of faith hiring me, and I had to work to figure out some things on the job and made a
Hmm.
lot of mistakes and disappointed a lot of people along the way. And I remember being in a movie theater one night with my parents in the other movie theater. I was in one movie theater with my brother, and my parents were watching a different movie, same time in this Upper West Side theater. And I started having, I was having breathing problems essentially. And I grabbed my brother and I said, I have to leave. And I was like, all right, let's go find mom and dad. So the four of us now we're on Broadway and 68th, like outside of this movie theater. It's starting to rain and I am like losing my mind. My parents they have not understood what's going on. They have just come to visit and they're like, what is happening to our daughter?
Right.
I tell them, and my dad says, well, you can quit. And I said, I'm sorry, what?
Right.
I'm
Right.
sorry, what?
Like, aren't you supposed to say, keep going? You're going to be able to
Yeah.
do this.
He's like, so
Right.
quit. He's like, so
Right.
quit.
That's not right. Yeah.
And he wasn't the first person in my life to be like, just give up or quit. My high school teacher, I remember, my English teacher, I remember she was, we always had that one teacher in high school, maybe who was not more than a teacher, like they were a friend and maybe they would listen to you. You would go in and with your problems. So mine was Mrs. Perchuk, and I would go. And I remember senior year, I was so stressed. I had like all these responsibilities. I had taken all these leadership roles and I felt like nobody was helping me. Everybody was just like, well, Farnoosh will figure it out. And I went into her class one day after school and I was like, I don't understand how to motivate my, whether it's like my yearbook team or my,
Yeah.
my theater company or whatever. Like everyone's just like lazy. I don't get it. And she's like, so stop doing you. Stop helping them. Just stop. And I was like, but then there won't be a yearbook. Then there won't be a play. Then there won't be a newspaper. And she was like, well, that's for your, and I didn't listen to her and I ended up doing all the things. But it's interesting that these
Yeah.
elders, right? These more
Right.
experienced people who are like, there is another door.
Absolutely. And it's so funny as you said the story, especially about your dad, it completely reminded me of my dad. And it's funny because in high school I probably similar to you like this, and I was this type A student, and I would study, 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 go to play my sports, study, 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 play my sports. It was like back and forth between the athletic field and, studying. And that was like my life. And I was go, 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 go. And my dad would look at me and I'd be all stressed out. I'm not going to get this paper done, or I didn't get
Yeah.
an A on the paper. And my dad would look at me and say, just stop studying. Just come watch a TV show with me. Let's hang
Yeah.
out. Who cares? And I'd say, no, but I have to get an A on this paper. And he'd say, like, but do you really? Who cares? Like, who
Yeah.
cares? Is it
Yeah.
going to matter in life? No. And
No.
he used to it's so funny because when people talk about, these like really intense parents and, the competitiveness of it all. And like, I'm like, I did not grow up with that at all. I grew up in an environment, like a school that was probably like that with many parents, but I always like, my parents were the opposite of that. They were always like, just relax, enjoy life. So I say it's my own. So I'm like, oh, it was just all me. I just created all my own.
Yeah.
At least at that time in life, I
And
created
you
all
were-
my own stress. Now there's other stress, but that was my own stress, at least at the time. But it's funny when you said that story, so reminded me, I could
Yeah.
totally see my dad saying the exact same thing to me.
It's so funny. But one thing that came out of that, uh, that huddle with the Torabis outside of the movie theater that one day, that fateful night.
Did you at least have candy with you? Did you have some candy from the
No, I
movie?
mean, I felt as though I was, I don't know what the metaphor is, but that was a weird time in my 20s where I was numb. I was so numb to everything. And I was just going through the motions of work and coming home and work and coming home that, someone needed to snap me out of it. And ultimately my father, he was like, okay, the happy medium, like if you don't want to quit, and you don't want to be miserable at work, I think you need to go to work tomorrow and tune all the noise out. You're taking everybody's feedback and like just go in and like put your headphones on and get your work done. Try not to talk to anybody for like just to like reacclimate, because I feel like what was stressing me out was all of the interaction with everybody and everyone else's stress on me, especially in a high intensity newsroom. If you've ever worked in a newsroom in New York, like everyone is like on deadlines, everyone is stressed out, everyone needed something 5 minutes ago. And I was a producer and I was like, I have a checklist of things I have to do. I'm just going to do that. And I'm going to try not to chit chat and get into other people's conversations and get them to stress with me. And I just want to, and because I did have in particular a few people who were always like grabbing my ear and just making me more stressed.
Right.
Like, I'm just going to like tune out. And that was called managing myself. It's like, you can't control other people.
Right.
But you can
Absolutely.
control
Yeah.
yourself.
I think that's also a good thing for people to think about. The 20s is a tough time, and going from, being in the academic world and with your friends all the time to going into the work world and having to work and interact with people of all ages, working, all day versus being a student and being in a classroom part of the time. And it's a really big, I think it's a big transition for people for so many reasons. So I think that's probably a somewhat of a common experience that you had. So on that note, though, of going from sort of young adulthood into adulthood of our 20s, when we are adults, what can we do to teach our kids to be financially literate, to help them not just in their 20s, but in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond?
Honestly, if you have a child who is between the ages of, I'd say, 12 and up, 12 to high school, encouraging them to work. And, this doesn't mean like they're getting a part-time job at the ice cream store necessarily, but if that's what they want to do, that's great. If they're too young, they can't do that. But what can they do around the house, around the neighborhood? There are studies that have found that adults who are financially more successful or entrepreneurial, there is a pattern where as 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds, they had jobs. Having a job, one, it teaches you what it takes to earn, and it teaches you accountability. When you get the paycheck, you're learning to budget, you're learning to potentially save, and you're making spending mistakes, and you're getting I always say, like, try to create a framework for your kids so they can fail with guardrails, So this isn't about learning everything perfectly. This is actually a great time in their lives to fail and learn lessons about money through their own missteps. And so giving them the allowance, but saying, okay, this allowance needs to cover A, B, and C. It needs to cover, when you're out with your friends, those expenses. It needs to cover the gas in your car. Decide as a family where you need this, so it's not just like, oh, I get to do whatever I want with it. There are responsibilities that are going to be tied to this money, expectations. And a portion of it, you can do whatever you want, but there's always going to be, like, you have to cover your own things. Some months they might run out. Well, don't help them. If they run out of gas money, they're walking to school or they're taking the bus or they're getting a ride. They have to figure it out. With younger kids, I think it's just important to cultivate the curiosity. Some kids are going to be more curious about money. My daughter, the question the other day in the car, what is an ATM? She's been seeing these signs, and she's in the Girl Scouts, so she's learning how to sell and counting money and all that
Yeah.
stuff. She's a saver. I give her money. She puts it into her piggy bank. Her brother is like, can we go to Target? So I think, but for both of them, I just, again, with my parents, we don't not talk about money. And if I'm doing something that's maybe at their age level, whether that's, uh, gosh, at the grocery store even, and comparison shopping. When they were
Mhm.
younger too, I would take them with me. We would, shop around together. We'd have
Mhm.
a list. Um, I actually did a whole workshop on kids and money the other day for my members club. And for the young kids, again, it's about cultivating curiosity. They're going to ask awkward questions. Are we rich? Why don't we have this? How much money do you make? And the
Mhm.
trick to that is not like my parents would probably do as I was a little kid, like, oh, that's ask me later, avoid
Right.
it because it's uncomfortable and you're caught off guard. The trick is to answer the question with your own question. So if your
Mhm.
son or daughter is like, "Mommy, how much money do you make?" You will say, "Well, what makes you curious?"
Right. Right.
And see where they're coming from, because then you can address that as opposed to maybe even the question. Sometimes kids just want to know that we're safe, we're secure, um, and it's less about the dollar amount, but it's just that they want reassurance of those things because they're going to school and they're hearing stories. Maybe they're hearing about, like, my friend's dad lost his job or what have you, and they're bringing that home and they're curious. Um, and there are lots of tools out there as well, apps. There's
Mhm.
Go Henry, and this is now for the kids who are earning some of their own money, whether even if it's just through bar mitzvah money or birthday money or graduation dollars, and they want to put it somewhere. That's a big question parents ask. Like,
Mhm.
where am I parking their money? Where are they parking their money? One, you can obviously open up a bank account anywhere for them, with them. A credit union is a great place to start, a community bank, places where the ATMs are accessible in your neighborhood, in your town, where there's a good app they can use to track their money. But then there's specific apps that are built for families and kids. One is called Greenlight. The other one is called Go Henry. You get a debit card attached to your bank account, and the app has supplemental things like games and education. Some of them allow you to also learn how to invest, which I would just caution, make sure you're aware and you're, in step with your child if you are going to give them the reins to start investing. I think that's important, but I think it needs to be observed.
Absolutely.
You don't want them, making silly mistakes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I like what you said about the working thing, though, because I think if kids have a job, even if it is something like you said around the house, right? Even if it's just
Yeah.
a chore around the house, but they're doing that, it's more showing versus telling them this is how you
Yeah.
save. Like they're getting to actually
Right.
do. And when
Oh,
you're doing something versus just being told something, it's going to be a lot more meaningful. So I really do. I like that. So one more question for you before our final question.
yeah.
Uh, a lot of people that listen to this podcast are from my community, the Nutritious Life Studio community, and many of them are female entrepreneurs. Can you give us your top 2 or 3 tips for a female entrepreneur?
I will say that one of the best passive income streams that you can create for yourself, and it's so important as women, as entrepreneurs, because there's a lot of uncertainty in running a
Mm-hmm.
business. And as women, we're living longer than men. We have to be really secure and we don't have all the hours. We're busy. And so passive income, ready for it?
I like it already. Tell me.
It's called investing. And a few years ago, I opened up, and I have a retirement account and I have IRAs, but I wanted to supplement that and start sort of like an emergency account for my business that I didn't know when I would need it. And I wasn't concerned about, like, that it was going to be invested in the stock market because I'm not pulling this money out right away. It was like, oh, down the road, 5 years, 10 years, which by the way, if you're investing in the stock market, you want to make sure that you don't need this money in the next 5 years because then, if there's a crash, it takes time for things to recover. So I said, okay, I'm just going to slowly and quietly open up a brokerage account, which you can do literally at any, like Charles Schwab, Prudential, Vanguard. And I opened up a brokerage account. I started investing every month in it automatically. And now it's grown maybe like 15% over these years, even with some downswings in the market. And for me, I haven't had to tap it yet, but now 5 years later, I'm like, ooh, isn't that nice? Because to be quite honest, I've been going 1,000 miles per hour since I was 20. I'm 44 now. I have 2 kids who are growing older, and they really need our attention more than ever. And truthfully, the economy is not so hot right now. And some of the partnerships that I've had in the past are taking slower to renew. So all this to say, like, I'm just happy I have that. I'm just happy. It's like, talk about relieving stress, to know that that is my break open glass in case of an emergency. And honestly, it was passive income because all I did was commit to automatically contributing, and a little bit goes a long way. So right now, like, you don't know what your future is going to look like in 5 years, right? Hopefully it's brighter and brighter and brighter. But, I feel like my life is bright, even though I'm slowing down a little bit in my responsibilities. I'm choosing to, because I know that I want to preserve my energy for the future. I want to be able to continue to go back to going at whatever speed I want down the road. But right now, I want to afford a little bit of a
You're in a different season. Someone said that to me.
Season.
Yeah,
Yeah.
someone said that to me recently, and I thought it was so good. They said, you're in a different season. And I said, I am in a different season.
Yeah. And I mean, it's really hard to come to terms with this as someone who, like, I'm sure all of you women listening and everyone listening, we are ambitious. We have lots of ideas. We want to execute on a lot of things. We want to go 100 miles per hour in our personal lives and in our professional lives. And to some extent, we've been able to do that, but it's not sustainable. And it isn't forever sustainable. Like, you have to permit yourself to take a beat and reflect and re-strategize, right? Your body is changing, your health is evolving, your family's evolving, your goals and needs are changing. And so then, of course, how you earn and how you spend and how you invest and how you do all your things with your money has to reflect that. And it doesn't mean you're not as ambitious as you were in your 20s. It just means that you're being careful,
Right. You're choosing to do things a certain way. You're being intentional about how you want to live your life.
And you have a long-term plan. This is an investment in your long-term health, financial and otherwise.
Oh, so good. Okay, so last question for you. How do you ignite your nutritious life on a daily basis?
Oh my goodness. How do I ignite my nutritious life?
What do you do that sets it in motion each day to keep you healthy and doing all the things?
So you know what it is? Oh my gosh, I have the answer. I didn't think I'd have
one. I'm so excited.
Most mornings during the week, I will work out. And I'm sure you can relate that when you do something good for your body in as early as the morning, I feel like it sets you up for more success the rest of the day.
Yes, 100%. Yes.
I work so hard. I burn to, I want the results of that workout. So I'm going to marry that with healthy eating. And that, I mean, not every day, but it is in the mind.
Yeah. Well, that's living a nutritious life. It's when you do this one thing, it then snowballs into, wow. I always say have a large glass of water with lemon in the morning. It is not even just because the water is good for hydration, right? But because it symbolizes to you, I'm going to be healthy today. I'm going to be healthy. It's just like this, like mental, even subconscious thing, like, today is a healthy day. And then you want to eat your healthy breakfast. And then you want to go to the gym like you. So exactly. I love that.
Because you start your day off with like sometimes I do with like a chocolate croissant, which I allow myself, whatever, if you feel like it, eat it. but like I'm not eating a salad for lunch. Like that just like starts off a whole carb day, and I'm really tired by 6 o'clock. So,
Yeah. Well,
you know,
we need to talk about that. No. But I'm glad that you make a conscious indulgence sometimes, but it doesn't have to spiral to the rest of the day. But that's another conversation,
I've
Farnoosh.
like given up. I'm like,
No,
all
no, no.
downhill
We're
from
going to
here.
attack that. That's going to be our next podcast.
Great.
This was so good. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for all of your amazing insight and sharing your personal journey. I loved hearing more about all of that. So good. Everyone listening, check out the show notes for more on Farnoosh, her incredible books, her podcast, So Money, you have to go listen to. And yeah, thanks. Thank you so much again for being here.
Keri. Thanks, everyone.